Trombone Shorty, Shortyville. Thanks for that inspiration for our next guest. Mac's going to introduce him in a minute. But first, if you'd like to speak to Luke Jones, who's calling our guest today, Max or I have a question. The number to call us is 410-922-6680. Today, we're talking about freeing marijuana. And joining our discussion, we have a special guest.
Right. So we've got Luke Jones. Luke Jones is the executive director of Maryland NORML. NORML is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, for those that you don't know. Luke's got 30 years advising the government. 30 years, Luke. You know, it's an impressive thing, and I can't wait to hear about. Look, Luke, other than having an awesome sense in music and a real good taste, I got to tell you, that's one of the best intros, right? Luke, how you been, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing great. It's really nice to be on your show today, Max and Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic, fantastic. You know, we are completely honored to have you here. In 30 years working in government affairs, public affairs, policy, you must use a lot of cannabis. But what keeps you going at such a challenging task, honestly, and why do you do this, Luke?
Wow, thanks for that question. You know, to be honest with you, I have to believe we can solve problems working together. You know, we've got a lot of problems, and, you know, if we can't solve the ones we agree on, we're in bad trouble. This one seems to be one that pretty much everybody agrees on. So if we can demonstrate we can get it together and solve this problem, I think we can move on and solve some other ones too.
Interesting. So it hasn't always been that way, though, has it, Luke? Now, it sounds like you're saying like it's low-hanging fruit, and this is something that may be almost at the goal line, you think?
Well, absolutely, we're at the goal line now.
But it hasn't always been this way.
No, it really hasn't always been this way. You know, when we started as an organization, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, public opinion was, you know, down around 12% for legalizing, you know, the personal use and possession of marijuana. And we're in the 70s now, and it's only going up as people realize that it's one of the most, in some ways, very minor, kind of inconsequential policy changes that we are confronting. You know, in so many ways, it seems like a huge, huge change. And then when the change comes, we think, well, that wasn't such a big deal after all, you know.
Right. It's like when Max and I finally get famous, it'll seem like it's an overnight success.
Right?
We're
not famous yet, you mean?
So, Luke, you know, we have so much to cover today. Did you want to start with what's happening federally, or did you want to start with locally in what's happening here in Maryland?
You know, I'd like to jump right in and use. I'd like to talk about a couple of things. You know, first of all, this is a nonpartisan issue. You know, when we talk about changing our marijuana laws, you know, people approach it from different reasons. People approach it for health reasons. People approach it for economic, you know, rational reasons. People approach it for criminal justice reasons. There's a whole bunch of reasons. It's a really nonpartisan issue, and so that's really exciting. And I kind of wanted to touch about that a little bit because, you know, at the heart of this policy is that we're going to treat this plant, you know, cannabis plant, you know, as if it's really a dangerous plant, you know, and it's a dangerous force in our society. But really, the justification was never really about that. You know, it really was about enforcing, you know, pretty racist public policy priorities. There was a pretty known intentionality that this would be something that we would be enforcing in a disproportionate way right out of the gate. So, you know, from a public policy perspective, bringing police officers, courts, you know, into how we handle cannabis in our society was never a good idea, and it never produced positive, you know, outcomes. So there's a real nanny state mentality behind this, you know, where the government reaches into our private personal lives, you know, and this is one example. And it's really odious because, you know, any rational, you know, grown adult person realizes that you don't have to agree with cannabis, you know, but treating people like criminals because they're engaged in risky, you know, behavior that you may consider to be, you know, risky or something is not grounds to arrest them.
Right.
You know,
Now, Luke, I got a question for you. And now, do you think it's more of like as soon as they started down this road of prohibition, they immediately knew that there was something wrong with it, and it is just taken this long to unwind? Or has something recently happened that you've seen in the past 30 years was like a tipping point maybe?
We've obviously reached a tipping point. I think that people will look back during the Obama administration at that Cole memo that gave the green light to, for states to go ahead and start regulating adult cannabis sales, marijuana sales, is evidence of that shift. And so I think we've fully turned that corner now, and people are just trying to figure out how to go about legalizing it. And one of the things we confront in this work a lot is a distinction between decrim and legalization, because legalization is complicated. You have to figure out what the tax rates will be and who gets to play in a legal market when you set up legal, commercial exchanges. Decriminalizing is where we stop arresting people, and so those two issues always get kind of tangled up around each other. And we think legalization is critical. We're on the cusp of legalization. But in the meantime, we're continuing to arrest people. We have about 17,000 people every year in Maryland that are arrested just for marijuana possession alone. And it's many thousands more encounters with the police that don't wind up leading to an arrest. So what we're talking about is about 60% of all drug-related arrests in the state right now, even under our medical program for marijuana, 60% of all of our drug-related arrests in the state are still marijuana. So this is a human rights abuse. It's a human rights violation. It's something that has to end immediately. And figuring out the ins and outs of a commercial market are tough, but it doesn't serve anybody's interest to keep sending police officers after people.
Luke, a question for you. So advising these federal agencies, that has to be a task. We Stephen and I have a little bit of experience, so we've actually been there and done that at nothing compared to what you do. But we were irritated and frustrated after the first 5 minutes. And, it's not because there wasn't a reason to be. But, Luke, talk to us about that. How difficult is getting the message over to the federal agencies?
Yeah, and to give you an experience, a short understanding is, you've seen what the state capitol, the House, these offices look like. They're pretty small offices, and they jam a lot of people in there. And if you're lucky enough to get on the calendar and a schedule to one of the representatives, if you get them, you might get an aide. If they're not necessarily open to what you have to say, you may have a meeting in the bathroom.
How many meetings have we had in the hallway, drive-by meetings, it seems like, that type of thing.
And you go on a day, you try to get as many meetings as possible.
Right.
And, so go ahead. Sorry.
Well, Max and Steve, let me talk about that, because one of the things we find out really quickly as citizens is that our elected officials are surrounded by people trying to talk to them every day, and most of them are paid to be there. All right, and so the average person, doesn't have the wherewithal, to gain the attention of these people and to have a big, impactful voice on policy. So one of the things we've been trying to do, is facilitate people to have a voice in that process. Now, I don't do a lot of, blame gaming on people, because what I notice very strongly, Max and Steve, is that when we go to Washington to lobby for cannabis policy reform, we let people know well in advance when the opportunity is there, and it's the same 10 people who show up, and Maryland is very close to Washington. There's millions of people in the state. There's tens of thousands of people, who agree that our policies and laws need to change. But who actually shows up, and a lot of times I talk to folks who don't understand why public policy is what it is, and they just don't even know who represents them in Annapolis or what the process is or how to get involved. So that's where organizations like Maryland NORML come in, and they provide a little institutional stability for people, so you can begin to get answers to questions like, how do we have a voice in the process?
Yeah, and that's extremely, extremely valuable. I can't stress it enough for anyone to find out who your representatives are in your state, and then also who's representing you federally, and send them an email, get some sort of communication with them, because through all this censorship that is out there now, that where people are claiming censorship, you can't get your message out. Influence your friends through conversations, but you have a direct connection to each one of your representatives, and they have no choice but to listen to you. They have to read your emails. They have to respond. And the more you hear, the better. They hear from you, the better.
For those of us just joining us, we're listening and we're talking to Luke Jones, the executive director of Maryland NORML. That's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Luke, I want to thank you again for being with us. Question for you. So to that extent, and really meeting with your delegates and speaking to your people, and certainly the work that you do, seems a bit like a thankless job. Would you say?
Yeah, well, it can be, yeah, but that's okay.
Got to have a passion.
I have a lot of fun doing it, and what I choose to do. I'm a family man. I'm a full-time employee. I don't do this full-time. I just choose not to spend a lot of frivolous time paying attention to what clothes Beyonce is wearing, or I don't follow every statistics on sports, and I don't play video games. The information really is available for folks that want to get involved, and that's what I found. Can I just share a couple things with you? About my own choices to spend some of my personal time on this issue. I had a neighbor. I wasn't involved in marijuana or cannabis or anything like that. But a neighbor of mine came by and he said, he knew that I didn't drink. I don't drink. And, he said, well, do you use marijuana? And I said, well, I did when I was a kid, but that was a long time ago. But I wasn't opposed to it, or anything. And then the next thing I know, come to find out that there's all kinds of people on my street, literally in my immediate neighborhood, who are, casually, from time to time, using marijuana. And I start to realize, what is the big deal here? Why are we arresting people? And I realized they're not arresting people in my neighborhood. I live in a very comfortable neighborhood in Silver Spring. We wave to our neighbors and all of that. And the cops aren't chasing us around, to make their quotas at the end of the month. They're chasing the kids in Baltimore around and Prince George's County around and throwing them into jail when they're 19 and stuff like that. And it's a disaster, so I'm ashamed. I just literally felt ashamed, that we were still doing this kind of behavior. So I just started making calls and getting involved and talking to people. And it seemed like this is something we could get done. So at the federal level, you asked about that. We're in the 117th Congress, the 116th Congress that just ended, of course, passed the MORE Act through the House of Representatives. I'm sure you guys talked about that on your show because that was a big deal. And it gave a signal that this bill is coming, and this bill is going to go to the Senate, and it's going to be a Democratic Senate. And the 117th Congress may or may not pass this bill, but federal marijuana legalization is right here. They're probably obviously going to start with the banks. They're going to start making it legal for people to trade marijuana money first, and they're they always have to start with that instead of mom and pop. And anyway, they're going to move that forward. And at the state level, guys, this is the year. We are on the cusp. The Maryland General Assembly just started on the 13th this week. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to pause you for a second, Luke. We want to hear this. Are you able to stay with us? We got to take a short break.
I'm going to stay with you as long as my battery.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Luke Jones from NORML. We'll talk about what's happening in Maryland. Luke, when we left, we took the break. You just started getting into what's happening and what's in store for Maryland.
I'm so excited to talk about this in the segment here. As long as my battery holds out, we have HB 0032, which is a bill that has been introduced in the House, and we're working very, very closely with a sponsor in the Senate to get this thing through in the current General Assembly legislative session. HB 0032 is going to legalize cannabis possession and use for adults. It's going to legalize home cultivation for adults. It's going to provide for a preference for family-owned production scale business operations as opposed to super, large, well-financed multi-state operators. Super excited about this bill.
Yeah, Luke, appreciate that. And we want to have you back because we want to talk more about this bill and other bills. We really, really appreciate you joining our show. I want you to let the audience know one last thing. How do they get a hold of you if they want to follow up or if they want to support you or your cause in any way? And finally, I want to know your thoughts about hemp because I know you're specific about marijuana, but how do you feel about hemp?
Absolutely. Hemp is the future, all right? We're going to come back. We're going to talk about hemp because I know that's a real deal. This thing about the marijuana, we really get in here to the issues about personal liberty and individual freedom and what's the proper use of our police. This other thing about hemp and the medicinal and other applications for this plant, we'll start talking about the market potential and where that's going. Mm-hmm. So people want to get in touch with Maryland Normal, marylandnormal.org. That'll actually right now bring up our Facebook page, which we're using sort of like a blog to keep everybody informed. We're literally posting on there every day. We have weekly public-facing meetings through Facebook Live. They're recorded. You don't have to have a Facebook account to click on this stuff. It's public. And there's a ton of information. We have Lobby Day, February 9th, 10th, and 11th. Register for Lobby Day so we can schedule an appointment for you, other people from your Senate district in Maryland, to meet with your elected officials to talk about cannabis legalization in the state. And that's how people find us, marylandnormal.org.
Luke, thank you. Keep fighting that good fight. Stephen, I believe we have it. We have Kevin Atticks with a hemp update actually on the line, right?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, Luke, thanks again, buddy. Thanks for staying on as well. We have Kevin Atticks from Hemp, Maryland. Kevin, you on the phone?
I sure am.
Awesome, man. Thanks for joining us today and filling us in on what's happening from the hemp side in Maryland because, we have a lot of listeners that are not only using our hemp CBD product or concerned about it, but we also have a lot of people that listen that are farmers in Maryland.
Right.
We also have people that are in the business or make investments and so forth. What do you got for us that's happening on the hemp side in Maryland?
Well, a couple of things. And again, thanks for having me on and making time for this. It was great hearing what Normal had to say. We've got our own issues in Annapolis, both pro and con. The first is that there's a good bill that adds a seat for hemp on the Maryland Agriculture Commission, which is a governor's commission for all ag. And the good news about that is it increases the legitimacy and really puts hemp kind of in the power play in terms of agriculture in Maryland. So that's a really important step. That bill number is HB 232, and it's sponsored by Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, who's the legislative hemp champion out of Montgomery County. And then we've got a bill that's come back from last year. I was on this time last year talking with you about a bill in Baltimore County, or coming from Baltimore County, that would prohibit hemp being grown near farms. This is a variant of a bill that was killed last year, and it's HB 249. And this basically says that if you're growing hemp within 25 feet of a residence or within a certain distance from 3 or more residences, you either can't grow hemp or you have to do it indoors with all kinds of filtration. And the problem with that is that most people who grow hemp live on their farm. And so, the step one is anyone who lives on their farm won't be able to grow hemp. The second is Maryland, as you know, we've got huge development pressure, so our farms are getting chopped up. Most farms abut another residence. And so, this would have a really deleterious effect on the industry. So it's no good.
Yeah, who's behind the bill?
So that's Delegate John Cardin out of Baltimore County is the sponsor of the bill.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and what district is that?
That is, you're asking me the trick question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's his district, but it's for the entire state. So it's a statewide bill. It's not a Baltimore County specific
All right.
bill.
Gotcha. So if people were to want to weigh in and give their opinion, what do you suggest, Kevin? Should they reach out to you and help? How would you suggest our listeners follow up?
Yeah, they should sign up for Hemp Maryland newsletter. Go to hempmaryland.org, and you'll see a way to sign up for our news blast. You can also follow us on Facebook. as well. We're posting information. The hearing for the bill is actually coming up this week, so we'll be sending out a blast tomorrow, just letting people know what the next steps are.
So a hearing, how are they doing hearings now with COVID? Because we used to go down to Annapolis. Are they doing them through Zoom now, or what's the process?
It is, yeah. Everything's virtual, and it's seeming to work well so far. But the more contentious bills have not been heard yet. So most of the bills being heard now, it's you hop on Zoom, and it's really quick, easy, no questions, you're in and out. I wonder what it's going to be like for bills that would have had hearings going into the late evening and into the early mornings. I don't know how that's going to work on Zoom.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Comeback. I would think that given the stress everyone's under right now, that the government would back off a little bit and try to make some decisions on things that really make things easier instead of trying to limit our farmers. Anyway, Kevin, thanks, man. We got to take a break. When we come back, we have everyone's favorite segment that you know as
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Noah. Talk to you soon.